The rain began at exactly 8:17 p.m. Not a soft drizzle, not the kind that made people romantic. This rain came down like the sky had finally lost patience with the town of Blackwater. Inside the tiny train station cafe, 12 people waited for the delayed night train. Some stared at their phones, some drank coffee, some watched the storm. And one of them was already dead. Nobody knew it yet. Martha Green wiped the counter for the third time in 10 minutes. "Storm like this," she muttered, "always brings trouble." Detective Elias Mercer looked up from his coffee. He was off duty, exhausted and halfway through a terrible blueberry muffin. "You say that every time it rains," he replied. "That's because I'm usually right." Elias smiled faintly. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and wet coats. The old station clock ticked loudly, slightly off rhythm, as if it had a nervous heart. Near the window sat a young woman with headphones around her neck, sketching in a notebook. At the far table, an older man in a dark green coat read a newspaper that hadn't been printed for 2 days. A nervous businessman paced near the ticket machines, and beside the fireplace sat Professor Leonard Vail. Quiet, still, watching everyone. He was known around Blackwater University as a brilliant historian, charming speaker, sharp dresser, the kind of man who remembered your name and somehow made you feel important. Tonight, though, he looked pale. He checked his watch every few minutes. Elias noticed. Detectives notice everything, or at least they're supposed to. At 8:43 p.m., the lights flickered. The storm growled outside. Then came a scream. The young artist by the window had stood so quickly her chair crashed backward. "Oh my God!" Everyone turned. Professor Vail sat slumped in his chair. A thin silver letter opener protruded from his chest. Blood spread slowly across his shirt. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Then, chaos exploded. Martha shouted for someone to call emergency services. The businessman swore loudly. An elderly couple near the door began praying. Elias stood instantly. "Everybody stay where you are!" Something in his voice cut through the panic. People listened, mostly because they were terrified. Elias approached the body carefully. No pulse. Still warm. Recently killed. Very recently. And strange. Very strange. Because Elias could have sworn nobody had gone near the professor. The storm knocked out phone service 10 minutes later. No signal. No trains. No way out. 12 strangers trapped together with a murderer. Classic nightmare. Martha locked the cafe doors. "Nobody leaves," Elias said. The businessman laughed nervously. "You serious?" "Yes." The man stopped laughing. Elias began with introductions. The nervous businessman was Daniel Cross, a property developer from the city. The artist was Nina Flores, 23, traveling home from an exhibition. The elderly couple were Harold and June Whitaker. The newspaper reader introduced himself as Simon Bell. Then there was Clara Hastings. She sat quietly near the fireplace, wearing a navy coat and leather gloves. Unlike everyone else, she didn't seem frightened, only thoughtful. Elias noticed that too. "You knew the professor?" he asked her. "A little," she replied calmly. "A little?" "He attended charity events my company sponsored." "What company?" "Hastings Pharmaceuticals." A few people glanced at her differently after that. Wealth had a way of changing rooms. Elias examined the body again. No signs of struggle. No overturned furniture. The silver letter opener belonged to the station cafe. Martha confirmed it had been behind the counter earlier, which meant the killer had taken it recently. But when? And how had nobody noticed? Then Elias saw something else. The professor's watch had stopped at 8:41. Interesting. The scream happened at 8:43. 2 missing minutes. Not much, but sometimes murder lived in tiny spaces. He questioned Nina first. "I was sketching," she said shakily. "What were you sketching?" She hesitated before showing him. It was the room, every person carefully drawn, including Professor Vale, alive. Elias studied the sketch. "You drew this tonight?" "Yes." "Finished when?" "About maybe 8:35. That mattered. In the sketch, Professor Vale held a teacup in his right hand, but the body now had the cup near his left. Someone had moved it. After death. Why? Daniel Cross interrupted. "This is insane. One of us is a killer?" "Looks that way," Elias answered. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. "I barely knew the guy." "But you knew him." Silence. Then Daniel sighed. "Fine. We had a business disagreement." "What kind?" "He blocked a redevelopment project near the university." "Publicly?" "Yes." "So people knew you hated him." "I didn't hate him." "You threatened him?" Daniel looked away. "Once." The room grew quieter. "Interesting," Elias said. "I didn't kill him." "Didn't say you did." But Elias wrote the note anyway. At 9:20 p.m., Martha served coffee to calm everyone down. Nobody really drank it. Except Simon Bell, the newspaper reader. He drank 3 cups. Elias sat beside him. "You're unusually calm." Simon shrugged. "Panic doesn't help." "What do you do?" "Freelance writer." "What kind?" "Investigative journalism." That caught Elias's attention. "Working on something now?" Simon folded his newspaper carefully. "Actually, yes." "What?" "A corruption story involving the university." Silence. Then Simon added quietly, "Professor Vale was one of my sources." Now everyone looked at the dead man differently. Not just a professor. A whistleblower. Rain hammered the windows harder. The station seemed smaller by the minute. Fear does that to places. Makes walls lean inward. At 9:47, Elias found the first real clue. In the trash bin behind the cafe counter lay a torn train ticket soaked with coffee. First class, purchased that evening. But only half remained. The visible name read, Hastings. Clara Hastings. Elias approached her slowly. "You threw this away?" "Yes." "Why?" "I missed my original train." "Mind explaining something else?" "Depends." "You said you barely knew Professor Vale." "I do barely know him." "Then why did witnesses at a charity gala last month see you arguing with him?" For the first time, Clara looked unsettled. "He was blackmailing my company." Nobody spoke. "He claimed Hastings Pharmaceuticals buried research results." Did they? Her silence lasted too long. Then came the second scream. June Whitaker pointed toward the professor's chair. "There!" she cried. Everyone turned. Written in spilled coffee across the table were 2 words. "You know." Nobody had been near the table. Nina nearly cried. Daniel backed away. Martha crossed herself. Even Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. Because for half a second, it looked impossible. Then he noticed the drip pattern. The coffee message hadn't appeared magically. It had slowly emerged. Someone had written with clear sugar syrup earlier. When coffee spilled across it later, the hidden words darkened. A delayed message. Prepared in advance. Smart. Very smart. The killer wasn't panicking. The killer was performing. Elias suddenly looked at Simon Bell. "Show me your hands." Simon blinked. "Why?" "Now." Simon slowly held them out. Ink stains, coffee burns, and one fresh cut. Thin, sharp, like a paper slice, or from handling a blade. Evidence against Hastings Pharmaceuticals. Clara stared at him coldly. "You little parasite." "Oh, please," Simon fired back. "Your company poisons people for profit." "Careful." Or what? The tension crackled like electricity. But Elias wasn't convinced. Something still bothered him. Something tiny. Tiny things solve murders. He looked again at Nina's sketch, then at the body, then at the station clock. Tick, tick, tick. Suddenly, "Wait!" Everyone froze. Elias walked to the clock slowly. "It's wrong." Martha frowned. "It loses a few minutes sometimes." "How many?" "Usually 2. 2 minutes. Professor Vale's watch stopped at 8:41. The scream happened at 8:43. But if the station clock was slow, then the murder and scream happened almost simultaneously. Meaning, the killer never had time to move around afterward, Elias whispered. The room fell silent. He turned toward the fireplace, toward Clara Hastings. "You never left your chair," Daniel said. "That proves nothing," Clara replied evenly. "No," Elias said quietly. "It proves everything." He walked closer. The killer prepared the coffee message earlier. Clever distraction. Clara said nothing. He wanted us chasing drama instead of timing. Still nothing. But the real trick was simpler. Elias pointed at the teacup beside the body. In Nina's sketch, the cup sat near Vale's right hand. Nina nodded slowly.